Relax and forget your day for a short while as we talk about colonial American life before the Revolutionary War. Subscribe if you'd care for more stories like this to listen to before you sleep. Onward we go. A year in the colonies. Life in 1752. Winter. If you found yourself in the American colonies in the early days of 1752, the first thing you'd notice is the stillness of winter. The land is at rest beneath its white blanket, from the far reaches of Massachusetts Bay down through the forests of Virginia and the farms of Pennsylvania. Smoke rises from stone chimneys in gentle curls, each one marking a home warmed by the steady heart of a fire. The year begins in quiet rhythm. In Virginia's tidewater, frost clings to the tall grass and the James River moves sluggishly beneath a thin skin of ice. In a small farmhouse near Williamsburg, you'd see the Carter family beginning their day. The father, Thomas Carter, is already up before dawn, coaxing the fire back to life. His breath fogs the cold air as he stirs coals in the hearth, adding dry oak and pine until flames crackle again. From the kitchen comes the familiar sound of the iron pot being lifted onto the crane. Mary Carter, wrapped in wool shawls, pours in cornmeal and water, stirring with a long wooden spoon. The scent of corn porridge soon fills the room. It's plain food but nourishing, sweetened with a drizzle of molasses if the family can spare it, or flavored with salt pork boiled the night before. As the family gathers, Thomas, Mary, and their 3 children, the conversation is quiet. The eldest son, Jacob, talks about needing to check the traps along the frozen creek. The youngest, Anna, asks if she might go with him, and her mother smiles faintly, saying perhaps tomorrow when the frost isn't so sharp. Outside, the land is both harsh and beautiful. The fields, bare and grey, lie sleeping under frost. The carters' oxen stamp their hooves in the cold, steam rising from their backs as Thomas checks their feed. The animals are thin from the season, but holding on thanks to hay stored carefully in the barn last autumn. A few hundred miles north near Philadelphia, winter takes a slightly different shape. The town hums more than the countryside does. You'd hear the creak of wagons on icy cobblestones, the ring of a farrier's hammer, and the faint chatter of market vendors. Here in a modest house near the Delaware River, the Miller family lives. Tradespeople by blood, bakers by craft. Elizabeth Miller begins her day before sunrise, lighting the oven fire. The sweet, yeasty scent of dough fills the air. Simple loaves made from coarse wheat flour and molasses. Customers will come for them soon, wrapped in scarves, stamping the snow from their boots. Her husband Henry listens to talk at the market about a young Virginian land surveyor, George Washington, who has been making a name for himself in the backcountry mapping lands claimed by both the English and the French. The gossip drifts between practical and political. Prices of sugar and tea are up again. Shipping has been slow due to storms off the coast. The talk of boundary lines, of land and loyalties, of French expansion westward. These are worries for the educated and the ambitious, but still, they spread, whispered over mugs of cider in taverns. The word war is never shouted, but sometimes it's muttered. Out on the frontier, west of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the air is colder, the nights darker, and the isolation deeper. There, settlers like the Bennett family live far from the comforts of towns or trade. Their cabin is simple, logs chinked with clay, smoke leaking softly from a small stone chimney. Inside, a stew of beans, venison, and wild onions simmers slowly, filling the room with warmth. Frontier winters are not for the unprepared. Firewood is gathered daily, snow must be cleared from roofs to prevent collapse, and rifles are kept clean in case of hunting or danger. The Bennett's eldest son, Elias, checks his traps for rabbit and fox, while his mother Ruth tends to her youngest, who has taken a winter chill. Her remedies are simple but rooted in deep tradition. A tea of willow bark for fever, honey and vinegar for the throat, a poultice of onion for the chest. In the evenings, families everywhere gather close to their fires. Candlelight flickers against rough-hewn walls. Children listen to stories told by parents or grandparents, tales of old England, of voyages across the sea, or of spirits that walk in the woods. It's a time for rest, reflection, and quiet endurance. Meals are hearty, built from what was stored through the autumn: dried beans, salted pork, smoked fish, root vegetables, and bread baked weekly from coarse flour. Pies made from apples stored in barrels appear on Sundays, their aroma a comfort against the cold. Cider, kept in wooden casks, is poured sparingly and savored slowly. Medicine in these months is an art of patience and faith. The herbalists and midwives of each town know their plants by heart. Comfrey for bruises, peppermint for the stomach, sage for strength. The sick are tended at home, with prayers and poultices, and survival often depends as much on warmth and rest as on remedy. And all across the colonies, beneath the hush of winter, a quiet unease stirs. Reports drift in from traders and trappers, French forts rising along the Ohio Valley, alliances forming among native tribes, and English scouts moving cautiously along rivers whose frozen waters mirror the uncertainty of what is to come. But in 1752, life still belongs to the rhythm of the land. People live by the turn of the seasons, by the work of their hands, by the heat of the hearth. At night, you might walk through a small Virginia village and hear the wind through the pines, the creak of shutters, and the soft crackle of distant fires. The stars shine with the same brilliance they always have, cold, clear, and eternal, as families rest in quiet faith that spring will soon return. Spring. By the first mild days of March 1752, the American colonies begin to stir again. The snows recede from the hillsides, the rivers break free of their ice, and muddy paths wind through the forests like veins of new life. Across New England, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, the people emerge from their winter stillness, leaner, paler perhaps, but alive and grateful for the turn of the year. In the tidewater of Virginia, the Carter family's fields begin to soften underfoot. Thomas and his sons take up their mattocks to break the clods, preparing the soil for the planting of corn and tobacco. The earth is dark, cool, and fragrant, heavy with promise. They work by the sun, the father calling steady rhythm as the boys follow, dropping seed into furrows with practiced hands. Mary Carter tends to her small kitchen garden near the house. She turns the earth for herbs, sage, thyme, and mint, and for vegetables, peas, lettuce, and carrots. Each row is neatly marked with sticks wrapped in twine. Chickens scratch nearby, impatient for insects now crawling from the damp soil. The family's cow, thin from winter, gives milk again. The butter churn is brought out once more. By April, Virginia hums softly with life. Frogs croak in the marshes, blackbirds trill in the willows, and the sound of axes echoes through the woods as neighbors repair fences and barns. The Carter children chase each other through the field edges, laughing, barefoot for the first time since autumn. Meals grow brighter with the season. Wild greens like pokeweed and dandelion are boiled as spring tonics, meant to cleanse the blood after the long salted diet of winter. Fresh milk, eggs, and the first of the hen's clutches find their way into puddings and custards. On Sundays, the family may roast a small chicken with herbs and onions, a luxury compared to the salted meats of the cold months. Spring. Further north in Pennsylvania, The Millers are once again busy at the bakery. The Delaware River runs strong now, carrying barges from upstate loaded with flour and barrels of molasses. Trade has resumed, and the town is alive with voices: German, English, Scots-Irish, and Dutch, all mingling in the market square. Henry Miller listens to the talk of new settlers moving westward into the frontier lands beyond the Allegheny Mountains. The word Ohio comes up often now, whispered like a promise of new opportunity and new danger. George Washington, it's said, has been surveying land along those routes, his keen eyes measuring rivers and ridges for Virginia's claims. Most see him as a rising young man of discipline, a soldier in spirit even without a war to fight. But for most colonists, politics remains a far-off echo. What matters are the practicalities of life, the state of the crops, the price of nails, and whether this year's rains will be kind. The frontier itself, where the Bennets live, wakes later. The thaw comes slowly to the ridges near the Shenandoah Valley. The first signs of spring are faint, a trickle of meltwater from the hills, the sharp scent of pine sap, and the call of geese overhead. Ruth Bennett takes stock of her stores, smoked venison still hanging, jars of dried beans and the last of the potatoes, eyes just beginning to sprout. She soaks the beans overnight and simmers them with a bit of salt pork, humble but filling fare. When the first shoots of ramps appear in the woods, she gathers them eagerly. The greens are chopped and added to the pot, giving the family their first taste of something fresh in months. Her husband, Samuel, spends his days repairing the roof, clearing the trail that leads to their small corn patch, and riding to a nearby settlement once every few weeks for supplies, iron nails, powder, and sometimes news. The talk there is cautious. French traders have been seen near the Ohio River, building new outposts. Some say the British Crown is sending more troops to defend the frontier. Others shrug. They've heard such talk before. Back in Boston, meanwhile, the harbor begins to fill again with ships. Merchants shout prices over the din of gulls. Sailors stagger off deck with pay in hand, seeking the comfort of a tavern. The air smells of salt, tar, and fish. In homes along the narrow streets, women hang laundry from upper windows, and apprentices carry buckets of water from the pump. Among them is a young woman named Sarah Whitmore, who tends her widowed father's small household. She sews by the window, watching the street below, thinking of her brother who has gone to sea. She dreams of warmer days, of a walk along the common where the grass will soon turn green again. Cooking in Boston this time of year reflects both scarcity and hope. Dried cod and salt pork are still staples, but now turnips and onions stored in cellars find their way into hearty stews. When ships from the Caribbean arrive, they bring oranges and sugar, small luxuries that brighten tables and tempers alike. By May, all the colonies are alive with color. Dogwoods bloom in Virginia, apple blossoms scent the air in Pennsylvania, and lilacs open in New England yards. Travelers take to the roads again, merchants, preachers, farmers, and trappers. Wagons creak along muddy trails. Horses snort clouds of breath in the morning chill. Inns reopen their shutters, serving stewed mutton, ale, and bread to weary travelers. At evening, in every colony, candles are lit a bit later each day. The people linger outdoors longer, watching the sunset glow over fields and rivers, knowing that the season of labor and growth has begun again. The land hums, the heart stirs, and 1752 spring whispers the same quiet truth it always has, that life, however fragile, always returns. Summer. By June, the colonies are alive with warmth and motion. In Virginia, the Carter family rises at first light, the dew still clinging to their fields. Corn stalks stretch waist-high, beans curl along trellises, and tobacco plants bask in the morning sun. Thomas Carter moves among the rows, inspecting each plant, noting where a rabbit may have nibbled or a vine struggled to reach the sun. His sons carry water from the creek to the garden, careful to avoid disturbing the fish that dart near the banks. Mary Carter moves about the farmhouse with practiced efficiency. Breakfast is simple but nourishing. Soft-boiled eggs from their hens, fresh milk poured over cornmeal mush, a slice of buttered bread baked the night before, and a handful of wild strawberries for color. By mid-morning, she tends to her preserves and syrups. Rhubarb is chopped for early pies, and the last of the winter apples are peeled and dried over the hearth for long storage. The children spend their mornings in a mix of work and play. Jacob practices using a slingshot, aiming at cans or small rodents along the fence line. Anna and her sisters gather herbs and flowers, learning the names of plants that will be used for medicine, cooking, or household scents. In Pennsylvania, the millers are busy as the summer sun climbs high. Wheat fields sway in the wind. The scent of freshly tilled soil mixes with the aroma of bread baking in town ovens. Elizabeth Miller walks among her customers, exchanging greetings and small news. The George Washington has returned from surveying in the Shenandoah Valley, reporting the potential for fertile land and cautioning about the presence of French forts further west. Henry Miller and his apprentices haul sacks of flour and sugar, helping local bakers and merchants stock for the season. In taverns, men play ninepins and quoits after work, laughing over mugs of ale, while children gather near wells, skipping stones in the gentle river flow. Social life in towns is measured but lively. Fairs, auctions, and Sunday sermons form the backbone of community gatherings. Out on the frontier, the Bennett family is at the height of seasonal labor. Samuel rises before dawn, checking the fences and making sure livestock have fresh water. The corn patch is weeded and tended, squash vines stretched across mounds, beans twined along supports. Hunting continues for deer and rabbits. Fish are caught in rivers swollen by spring rains. Ruth Bennett spends hours preparing food for preservation. Salted pork hung on hooks, beans blanched and dried, berries pressed into syrup, and apples sliced for drying. Meals in the summer are lighter and fresh. Breakfast often features garden vegetables, eggs and bread. Lunch might include cold meats from winter stores, fresh fruits and cheese. Supper is an opportunity for slow cooking. A stew of beans, onions and early potatoes simmers over the fire, sometimes with smoked venison added. Herbs grown in window boxes or garden beds, parsley, sage, thyme, flavor every dish. Drinks are often cider, fresh water, or weak beer brewed for household consumption. Games and leisure occupy children and adults alike. Outside the town or village commons, boys play early forms of cricket or stool ball. Girls spin hoops or play tag. Cards and dice are popular among adults in taverns and homes, often accompanied by quiet conversation about crops, land deals, or rumors of war. Across the colonies, the whispers of political tension grow, though the average family remains focused on survival and prosperity. Land disputes in western Pennsylvania and Virginia are common, with surveyors, including George Washington, carefully measuring plots claimed by multiple settlers or the Crown. There is unease about French forts along the Ohio River and native alliances forming, though most colonists feel the danger as distant. Still, letters from merchants, traders, and officials warn of the potential for conflict. Women continue to navigate cultural expectations carefully. They manage households, gardens, and children, all while maintaining social appearances. Gatherings, quilting bees, church socials, or informal visits between neighbors provide space to exchange news, trade recipes, and offer practical advice about medicine or childcare. Herbs and flowers are used not only for food, but for treatments. Peppermint for upset stomachs, willow bark for pain and chamomile for children's fevers. Evenings in summer are long and gentle. Families gather outdoors when weather allows, listening to the soft hum of insects, the trickle of streams, or the distant lowing of cattle. Fires are kindled later, just enough to illuminate the evening meal or a story told to children about their ancestors, journeys from England or Ireland. The scent of fresh bread, roasting meat, and herbs fills the air. Candles are lit for tasks that cannot wait until daylight, their flames flickering in windows across towns and farms alike. By nightfall, the colonies rest under the deepening summer sky. Stars shine with clarity in the frontier, while towns glow softly with lanterns. The rivers, forests, and fields pulse with life, yet a calm rhythm persists, the steady heartbeat of human labor, community, and survival. The distant murmur of political tension lingers in whispers, but for now, the rhythm of daily life dominates. Summer 1752 is a season of growth, labor, and gentle abundance, a vivid living portrait of colonial life that balances work with moments of joy, discovery, and quiet reflection. Autumn. By September, the American colonies are wrapped in the rich colors and scents of autumn. Fields of corn stand tall, their golden tassels swaying in the warm winds. Beans have ripened on their vines, and the first hints of frost whisper from the far hills. In Virginia's Tidewater, the Carter family works from sunrise to sunset. Thomas Carter leads the harvest, cutting stalks of corn to dry for winter, while his sons bind wheat and beans into neat sheaves. Mary Carter and her daughters focus on the kitchen and garden. Root vegetables, carrots, turnips, parsnips, are pulled from the soil and scrubbed for storage in the cellar. Apples are peeled and pressed into cider. A few are set aside for pies and drying. Herbs are gathered for winter use, sage, thyme, and rosemary tied into bundles to hang near the hearth. Breakfasts are hearty, cornmeal porridge flavored with molasses, fresh milk, and buttered bread. Lunches are often taken in the fields, cold meats, cheese, bread, and fresh apples. Supper is a slow, careful ritual. Stews of venison, pork, and garden vegetables simmer over the fire. Fresh pies baked from early apples or preserved berries, and home-brewed cider poured into cups for each family member. Recipes are passed down orally, each measurement learned by eye and touch rather than scale. Further north in Pennsylvania, the Miller family continues their work in the fields and the bakery. Wheat is harvested, ground into flour, and baked into loaves. Sugar and molasses are rationed carefully, used to sweeten bread, puddings, and cider. Elizabeth Miller walks among neighbors, trading advice on preserving meats, making cheese, and storing winter vegetables. Social gatherings, quilting bees, cider presses, and Sunday church socials are common this time of year, blending work with fellowship. On the frontier, the Bennett family faces the season with a mixture of relief and vigilance. Samuel and Elias ride the trails to check distant fences, tend livestock, and hunt what remains of the summer game. Ruth and her daughters sort and store preserves: beans, dried berries, salted pork, and smoked fish. They begin mending winter clothes, spinning wool, and preparing bedding for the months ahead. Autumn is also a time of games and leisure, particularly as harvest work slows. Children play hoop and stick tag or early forms of cricket. Adults gather in evenings for cards or ninepins, occasionally exchanging news of trade, land deals, or distant skirmishes in the Ohio Valley. Conversations about George Washington's surveys reach even the smallest villages. He is a rising figure, mapping disputed lands and serving as an example of colonial ambition and duty. Colonists watch him, and others like him carefully, wondering if the tension with the French and their native allies will erupt into war. Medicine remains a careful balance of folk knowledge and observation. Willow bark is used for fevers, poultices for injuries, herbal teas for digestion and coughs. Midwives and herbalists move quietly from household to household, tending to the sick and advising on care for both humans and animals. Livestock are prepared for winter, hooves trimmed, shelters reinforced, and feed measured carefully. Political tension is tangible, even if distant. Land disputes in western Pennsylvania and Virginia continue. Talk of French forts along the Ohio River spreads through towns and taverns. Assemblies debate taxes, trade regulations, and the Crown's instructions for defense. Most families hear these discussions secondhand, through letters or traveling merchants. Yet the unease is always present, a quiet undercurrent beneath the routine of work, meal preparation, and family life. Evenings are golden and reflective. The sky glows long after sunset, amber clouds rolling across the horizon. Families gather by the hearth, recounting the day's labor, telling stories of past winters, and passing knowledge to the next generation. Meals are shared slowly, savoring the harvest. Roasted poultry, root vegetables, dried fruits, and freshly baked breads. Music may accompany storytelling, comes a flute, a fiddle, or simple songs sung by candlelight. As October deepens into November, frost begins to lace the windows again, signaling the approach of winter. Rivers swell with autumn rains, and forests echo with the calls of migrating birds. The colonies, from bustling towns to quiet frontiers, pause to reflect on the season, the success of the harvest, the health of family and livestock, and the preparations necessary for the months to come. By nightfall, the land is quiet once more. Fires burn low, casting long shadows on walls and snow yet to fall. Children sleep under warm blankets, parents rest after long days, and the cycle of colonial life, hard, beautiful, and deeply connected to the rhythm of the seasons, continues. Autumn 1752 is a season of completion, reflection, and preparation. A vivid moment in time when families sustain themselves, celebrate their work, and ready for the cold months ahead, all under the watchful gaze of a land rich with promise, beauty, and hidden tensions.